Hi everyone, welcome back. Our second to last leg, this is from Watson Lake down to Prince George, and this one's going to be real interesting. I would encourage you to get some of your favorite music and put it on because I'm not going to talk much. What you're going to see here is our departure from Watson Lake, and again we've got this one going kind of fast for you so it gets going. Well, this is a long leg. I think it goes about 25 minutes here, but it was almost 3 hours, I think, 2.5, 3 hours. And what you're going to see in this video is that we are really exposed. This is probably the most exposed leg on the trip. We, for the first 3/4 of the trip, are going to be between two mountains, ridges, actually in a valley, all the way down to pretty close to Prince George, before we see any sign of civilization down there at Mackenzie. And we joked on this leg that basically if we go down here, we're another Amelia Earhart story, but nobody would care. I mean, there are no roads. We're basically going to follow a river down a valley. And it's, the only way to see this part of the country in an airplane. But we are very exposed, especially single engine flying. So, back to my admonition about making certain your airplane is in top mechanical shape. So we just left Watson Lake here, and it is a little flat till we get to the valley. Actually, it's a good, it's about 50 miles before we get there. You can start to see the mountains coming up there. The nice thing is the weather forecast was good. I would not attempt this portion of the route if the weather forecast was iffy. There's one pass that puts you at about 3,500 MSL to get through. And that means that's the level of the ground. You need to be at that to get through it. So, any low ceilings, etc., could be kind of tough here. You could get down the road quite a ways and have to turn back. And just the way these ridges are, the low stuff can kind of hang in the valley between the mountains. So it can get rather dicey. But here we had 9,000-foot ceilings forecast all day down to Prince George. And hate to spoil the movie for you, but it worked out. Again, I wouldn't attempt this route unless we had a really good forecast. I think I mentioned when we came up this way, we spoke to a couple of other airplanes that were headed back towards Prince George, but on this day, on this leg, we didn't see anybody along the entire route. There's Aeroplane Lake, but we didn't see any airplanes in it. So lots of water along this route. It's marshland, and you can see the streams and then lots of little ponds. And right there, just going by, you can see fire damage as well. We saw a couple of areas here that had substantial fire damage. There's an area coming up right there, you can see. And a couple of areas, the fire went completely across the valley to both sides of the hills. So again, besides weather, you can have fire issues along this route. There's not a lot of good places to put down here. I was constantly looking, but again, as I mentioned, we are exposed. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. So we enjoyed the scenery. As we get a little further down the route here, the mountain sides, to give you some idea, are at 7,000 and 8,000 feet. But the surface here is at 2,500 to 3,500. So they're not real tall. We've had some people ask us how we got the cameras to last so long. Basically what I did, if you look at they are GoPro Hero 9 cameras, and you can buy extended battery packs for those, which I did, and that puts them in a nice waterproof mount. And then I also wired power to those from underwing inspection panels, and when I turned the nav lights on, it kept the battery charged. So it worked very well. Most of the time the Hero 9 will run out in about 50 minutes or so. So in order to capture the whole flight, you put a pretty large data card in there, and then with the extended battery pack, it covered the whole route. You can see the size of the valley start to narrow here. And we're coming up on the only saddle pass, actually. It's about 3,500 MSL, mean sea level, above sea level. So we need about 4,000 feet or so on the altimeter to get through that with good ground clearance. This leg of the trip is completely inside Canada, so as I've mentioned on other videos, we're on a VFR flight plan, Visual Flight Rules flight plan, and we opened that up when we left Watson Lake, and it'll get closed by the tower at Prince George. So if we don't show up on time, they'll come looking for us. There's some pictures so you can see what it looks like on the sectional out the window and what it looks like on the GPS showing the terrain and how we're going right down the valley there below the peaks on either side of us. So right now we're coming up on this saddle by the Circe Mountain. That's what it looks like out the front there. Here's what it looks like on the GPS with the terrain. And so that's the saddle that we want to go over. That's at 3,500 feet. So this is the highest point along this trip, or along this route. and we want to make certain it works. So that was the Fort Ware Airport that we just went by. And you do broadcast your intentions there. So now we're following the Finley River there. And we're starting to see some signs of civilization. You can see a little road there off to the right. So up ahead, right at the top there, where this river comes out, you're beginning to see the north end of Williston Lake. There's a small town up there at the north end called Sayke. You'll see it coming up here in a bit. There it is on the sectional. And by the way, when you look at that sectional, there's a good view of the runway there. It's a gravel runway at Sayke. And there's the town. And there's Williston Lake. If you notice on the sectional, the picture back there, it shows all the black diamonds. Again, that's the VFR route put on the Canadian sectionals. And now it's 165 miles, nautical miles down this lake. It's a really pretty lake. It's about an hour flight time, actually. Now at least there are places to land along the shoreline. So we do tend to hug one side or the other, except where we go across some inlets. We're exposed a little bit over the water. It was interesting, these cleared areas off to the left. We don't know what they were, but there were lots of bulldozers. And they were moving logs and making nice flat land. Don't know why. It's in the middle of nowhere. We joked it was probably bulldozer school. There's one of those inlets I was mentioning off to the left. We're going to go across, and that's a Ospika arm, actually. And there's a little airport tucked up on the left side there, Ospika. Unfortunately, the camera just looks forward. That's actually the last airport until we get to the south end of the lake, where the town of Mackenzie will be. And Mackenzie is a mandatory reporting point. Look at the reflections in the water. It was just a really gorgeous day to make this trip. Hardly any wind. It's just beautiful, and the only way to see it is via airplane. I know you're seeing some little roads along the side. Those are really just old logging trails. Hey, a boat. Starting to see some signs of civilization. And there we go, coming up on Mackenzie. If you look hard, you can see the runway over there off to the left. There's a good picture of it. But it's not a real big town. More boats. And guess what? There's a road now. It's the John Hart Peace River Parkway. It's almost like the Alaska Highway, but we're going to follow this one now pretty much all the way to Prince George. And as you can see, the weather stayed really nice for the whole trip. We're very, very fortunate. And we've got one more leg, which we'll share with you here. And the weather and scenery on it were just as beautiful. If you remember, when we started this whole journey, Prince George was one of the first stops we got to after being in Edmonton for a couple of days and wondering if we were even going to be able to make the trip. So here we are, a little over a week later, coming back.
More than a week. 2 weeks.
I guess the time goes by faster when you're having so much fun. You can't tell it from the camera, but along this section of the route, big sigh of relief in the cockpit. Right here, we kind of let the main road go off to the right, and we took a direct course the last few miles to Prince George. It was only about 8 to 10 miles. And there we are, seeing the town of Prince George in the upper right quadrant. And the runway is right there, top right quadrant now of the video. And we were cleared to land. There's the river. It's a pretty town. There's a good view of the airport. And there's our final approach. So thanks for watching. One more video up.